Yeah, like, hey, why didn't you just go close? By the way, if anybody's listening to this, hopefully you are. We were talking about closed school shopping, which we definitely did here in the UK. But Ian used to drive 9 hours to buy his school clothes. No, was there no shops closer, or is it like an excuse to go to Seattle? Do you think?
Probably more of that, but yeah, I grew up in the northwestern corner of Montana, a little town called Kalispell, and there was of course there was stuff there, and there was a town 2 hours south called Missoula, but to get to a proper metro, you know, it was 9-hour drive to Seattle. That was the nearest big city, and sometimes my parents would just be like, "Well, right, here we go," and that was just sort of normal. We're just like, "Yep, 9-hour drive, right into the city."
Yeah,
Kalispell. Kalispell. Yeah.
I'm on the big G. Oh wow,
it's a
there's
beautiful
mountains.
Place, man.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
There is a lot of trees. I can confirm,
Plenty
lots
of
of trees.
Yeah.
So was this place just in the middle of nowhere?
Well, it's in the Rocky Mountain. It's in a mountain range called the Mission Mountains, which is a part of the Rocky Mountain Range. It comes down from Canada, right? Wow. And there's like Banff, which is a beautiful park, or Waterton, I think they call it.
Right? Banff's yeah.
And then it comes down, and then once it gets stateside, we call it Glacier Park. And Glacier, it's unbelievable. I mean, Glacier Park is absolutely beautiful. There's like active glaciers, big hikes, crazy lakes, like postcard stuff, you know. Mountains. Yeah. And so Kalispell is in a valley. It's called the Flathead Valley, right in the midst of these beautiful mountains. And my dad's still there, you know, and he said that when the pandemic happened, something like it increased in population by like 300%. I could be totally getting that wrong.
Well, because people were just like, let's go there. Yeah.
Yes, huge influx of people because now you can work remote, right? Property values went through the roof, spiked like crazy.
Really,
you know, people were paying $500,000 for a trailer home. You know, essentially like just insanity. Wow. But it is really lovely. It's really lovely. There's just not a lot of. I moved away because, you know, you always want to move away from your hometown. I think, or I did anyway. You know.
Yeah, and why did you go to Minneapolis?
Because I met a friend who was like, we're gonna be in this amazing band, and my brother's out in Minneapolis, and let's go do it. And I met him when I was 13. So at 13, I was like, yep, that's what we're doing. And then we did it. We did it. And his brother turned out to be a really nice guy, less like great of a singer. so like the whole thing, we like moved out to like so that his big brother could be the singer in the band, and then that just did not work. And so the guy, his name's Dave Young, still a dear friend of mine. Then he was like, well, I'm a pretty good singer, and he is. And so he just became the singer of the band, and you know, and my whole life revolved around this band called Down and Above for a long time. Yeah.
And how old were you when you moved to Minneapolis?
Right after I went to college. I did go to college in St. Paul, which is across the river, the Twin Cities, right? Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Yeah.
So I went to school in St. Paul, and I was 18. Yeah. Right out of fresh. So you
just went to uni, and then from uni went straight to Minneapolis to do the band thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So it could have been Seattle. I'm sitting here looking at a map, like the map's
could
right
have been Seattle,
in front of
for
me.
sure.
Yeah, and Seattle's closer, right?
Way closer. Yeah. But yeah, we were sort of, you know what it was, Scott? Like the grunge thing had happened, but we were more sort of like fans of 80s music. We're sort of in an odd generational cusp where like people that were a few years younger were really gravitating toward like the grunge Seattle thing.
Which was right like Seattle, yeah.
Yes. But I was like, if you want a real Seattle band, you got to listen to Queensryche. You know, and like the younger kids were like, this guy is not, you know. And so for us, it was like, we don't want to sound like grunge. We loved different bands, sort of like prog rock bands, right? So we were like, Minneapolis, that's where we're going. And I mean, it was really based on, you know, when you're a kid, like sometimes decisions are just it is so happenstance. It just so happened to be that the guitar player's brother lived in Minneapolis. That's the only reason. If he lived in Denver, if he would have lived in Seattle, we justified it though by saying Seattle seemed like the obvious choice, but we were like, no, because our bandmate is in Minneapolis.
Cool.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we were just like, we're gonna make that happen, and still here.
Survived it. Hey, I think that like one of the best things about being young, I think, around that time is that you literally know shit.
Right.
So you've got no kind of like baggage to distort your vision, or
it's true.
Oh, it's actually the opposite, isn't it? In a way, you've just got like nothing like for most people. Obviously, like bad things happen to a lot of people when they're young, but like for the most part, you know, people get to that, you know, late teens, early 20s, and you just don't know anything. So you're basing these big decisions based on zero life experience, you know. So you're just like, yeah, let's move. It'll be great, because that's exactly what we were like when I was kids. I was just like,
right?
Yeah, it was freaking great, man. I was in bands, and we were actually, I was like super into the grunge thing. Actually, it wasn't all about grunge, but it was definitely, there was a good helping of grunge in there. For me, when I was a kid, it was like a mix of like, it's a little weird. Like it was like obviously like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots.
But you also But you liked Steve Vai and stuff too,
exactly.
right?
That was the weird mix, right? So there was like all of these grunge bands. And on the flip side of that, like it was Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, like just those guys really. And so we like semi-hair metal kind of stuff, you know. And I was well into Whitesnake as well.
Well, it was on that transition. It was like, you know, I mean, what was the nail? I feel like there were a couple of nails in the hair metal coffin. They were Smells Like Teen Spirit. That was nail number one into the coffin. And then I think that nail number two was the Black Album by Metallica. It was like shut that coffin closed, say goodbye to hair metal, and maybe also Beavis and Butthead. Did you ever watch that show?
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah.
It was like the
way too late on the weekends.
Character, Stuart, the nerd character, wore a Winger shirt, and that was like not, you know. And I feel like I've even heard Kip Winger say something like that was like, you know, that did us in.
That sank the ship. Yeah, man. It was
you were
great,
cooler then, dude. You were cooler because you had grunge didn't threaten you. I think for me, I was already making this original music that probably sounded honestly more like the decade of the 80s than it did the 90s, and I didn't understand Nirvana. I didn't get it. I didn't know in real time why. I heard that it was different, but to me, just being honest, in real time, it was not a good different. I was like, this is noisy, doesn't sound like they can play very well. Then I realized they could play actually really well. I mean, that Unplugged is incredible.
Within that certain style.
Yeah, within that vibe. But
I
I just didn't get it. So I was very resistant to like really embrace the grunge thing because I loved all of the hair metal stuff so much more.
Yeah.
You know, it just really took me a while to come around. Yeah.
It's wild, isn't it? Yeah. It's I've got like this it's probably a 40-year-old's version of reality, but let me tell you about it. And it's to do with grunge actually.
Yes.
And I was thinking about it a few years ago, and I think that if you think about the over time, like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, very like 90s was sort of like grunge. It was also like rave. Can you remember like the rave scene here in the UK?
Of course, like techno. Yeah, especially in the UK.
It was a big thing over here. Yeah, right.
Yes.
And then it goes over into the millennium, and then you've got stuff like what's it called? My friend's really into it. Anyway, let me just sort of like frame this up. If you think about the decades, there's these really key musical movements that are linked to that period of time. When somebody says 80s music, we all know what they're talking about.
Yes,
when somebody says like 80s metal, we all know what they're talking about.
Right.
Grunge. Everybody's like, oh yeah, like Seattle, the 90s, right?
Yes.
The 90s, right? 70s. It's either, if somebody was like, oh, like disco, so you're either thinking about punk, you're either thinking about disco, like that kind of thing. 60s even, I guess like the 60s is a bit more, even 60s, like you've got this kind of like whole experimental movement going on in many different ways. When it rocks into over the millennium, and I think it's probably something to do with the way that music was actually marketed and sold. For me, it's very hard for me to say, oh yeah, like 2000 to 2010 was all about this.
Yeah,
it was about this scene here. And then 2010 to 2020, that was all about this scene. Like, I'm like...
Right.
And maybe that's got to do with because music started to be distributed in completely new ways. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure. What's your take on it?
Oh man, that's a great question. So right now I'm doing this deep dive on that Killers record called Hot Fuss, which was 2004, and I think it's a masterpiece. I think the bass playing, I think Mark Stormer's bass playing is masterful on it as well. Yeah. I love that record, but that was 2004, and that was in a time where, do you remember when like rap rock, at least in the US, so the UK had this explosion of electronic music, and the US was late to that. I think the US sort of got the, like, DJ culture didn't invade the like zeitgeist in the US until maybe the 2000 teens. We were way late. I remember being in the UK for studying abroad, being in Scotland and going to a club, and it was like light show, like it was that vibe, and we just didn't have that in the same way, and all that music was on the radio in the UK, and we just didn't have that same kind of like DJ culture. But did you guys have the era of like new metal and like Limp Bizkit, Korn?
Yes.
Like that was massive over here, and that was like late 90s to like kind of early O's, like somewhere, I don't know what kind of killed that. But I mean, man, Limp Bizkit put out a huge record, I think in like 01, maybe 2000, 2001. Significant Other, I think that's what it's called. But like huge radio hits, like and Nickelback, massive radio hits. And maybe like, so I remember like that era was really important to me because I loved like Rage Against the Machine and I loved metal bands. And so getting into that kind of like 311, I loved 311 and getting into all that stuff, that was like late 90s into the 2000s. But then I think what killed it is like the Strokes and maybe the Killers. There were some bands and like the White Stripes. There was like an indie rock, like similarly, like, you know, so you had this rap rock, at least in rock and roll. You have this huge rap rock new metal rise of like Limp Bizkit and Korn and then Nickelback, and it gets really kind of like pop diluted with a band like Nickelback. Yeah. Although, I mean, you know, like whatever, everybody hates Nickelback to the tune of like 300 million records sold. I mean, it's like too easy of a target. Like pick on another band. But like all the, you know, there's all this huge rise in that. And then I think what killed it are these more like indie rock bands that exploded. Modest Mouse, the White Stripes, the Killers, the Strokes. So it was like the bands. We call them in the States like the bands.
The bands,
You just took a name and put on the in front of it. And it, you know, and even Coldplay to some extent, you know.
We had something called Britpop over here, like, which was a big thing in the sort of like mid to late 90s maybe.
What are we talking? Oasis?
Oh, exactly. Oasis.
Yes, of course.
Blur.
Huge for us too.
Yeah, Blur.
Bush.
Bush, Bush were actually not Britpop. Here's the interesting thing, right? That when we talk about, and this is maybe why I'm finding it hard to see that linear line continue of these different eras, is that if you think about disco, hair metal, grunge, Britpop, punk, they're all associated with some kind of fashion movement at the same time.
Yeah, you're right. Right.
There's
a look to it.
Yeah, there's like grunge, right? Was that like everybody?
Yes.
You could see somebody walking in the street of an
Yes.
age, whatever they like. I mean, let's say they're between the ages of sort of like 11 or 12 and probably like 30 to 35 tops, right?
Yes.
And it'd be a dude with a sort of like what are them shirts called? A lumberjack shirt on, and
Like
the
a
baggy
flannel.
pants. Yeah,
Yeah.
flannel
Yeah.
shirt, and the bag. It's all about the baggy pants.
Yeah.
And sort
Yeah.
of like unwashed long hair. Basically, I'm just describing me when I was younger. But
Yes.
but yeah, and you were like, you'd know exactly what that person listened to.
Yes,
Does
you're right.
that exist anymore? Like, and I'm asking that because maybe I'm just too old. Maybe I'm just not involved in that like age bracket, so I'm not seeing it. Like, obviously, yes, there's like the hipster scene. I can't really tell you what music hipsters listen to. Truthfully,
I know.
I'm not sure.
And that could just be like a generational gap. Like, you know, it's that thing of like when the time has passed, the popular styles really rise to you're like, oh, you can identify decades easier, like way easier in farther hindsight. I bet when it's 2030, we'll be like, oh yeah, 2010s to 20 was defined by, it'll be easier to see it then, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
And
I don't know, dude.
fashion
Like
thing,
when I was doing
yeah.
the grunge thing, I was all about the flannel shirts. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a good. I was thinking like the indie rock thing was definitely big in the States, but then when it crossed over to 2010, it does feel like when social media happened and everyone went mobile, like everyone was looking at phones more. I wonder if things just got more sort of intermixed and sort of the new thing became the mashup, the collab, the sort of inner genre mixings.
Yeah.
We went through, I mean, in the teens though, we went through a big DJ phase in the States where like Zed, Avicii, I'm trying to think of like the Calvin Harris.
Oh yeah,
Like
Calvin Harris. Yeah.
Big songs stateside.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, we're catching up to the UK from the late 90s.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
I'd say also maybe it's just like dilution as well. Maybe it's just like because there's so many artists now. It's so anybody that wants to work hard can become an artist, right?
That's
You
true.
don't need
Yep.
the record label anymore. How much of the culture was driven by record companies? Maybe more than we knew, right?
Right, maybe so.
Yeah, maybe. So maybe it's like the dilution of that doesn't exist anymore, does it really? Not, you know, in a kind of like, well, you know, for the big artists it does, but like, you know, for the mass, you know.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, like is there anyone out there? This is probably a really dumb 43-year-old question to ask, but is there anybody out there that could go to a high school and look and say, oh, this is the music that everyone is listening to. Like this group of kids is listening to this group of kids is listening to this, like based on fashion. I'm not sure, maybe.
Yes, in our school you could go to the
For
school
sure.
and there was a
Yes.
split. Most people were into dance music and there was sort of
Yeah.
like a smaller portion that were into grunge. And
Right.
we all dressed
And that was
completely
it.
differently. Yeah, and that was the split. But maybe, you know, maybe it is the dilution. Maybe there's just so much out there. Maybe the social landscape, online social landscape, like all of the platforms, the Instagram, the TikTok, like maybe the obviously, you know, Spotify, maybe that just completely changed the
blew it
whole ecosystem. Yeah. I was like listening to a really great podcast recently with Grimes, you know, the artist Grimes,
yes.
who's married to Elon Musk.
Maybe
Is she married to? Anyway, she's maybe
they're
married. I
together.
don't know. Yeah, they're together. I'm not spreading any rumors. But anyway, she was being interviewed on Lex Friedman's podcast. And she was actually talking about Daniel Ek. And she was, is that his name, Daniel Ek? I think it is.
I think
right?
so. Yeah.
Spotify guy, right?
Yeah.
And she said she wasn't fit. I'm gonna fuck this up a little bit because obviously it's been weeks since I listened to it. But I'll be a little hazy about the message, and then people can go and check the podcast out for themselves. It's Lex Friedman. He's interviewing Grimes. It's a really fantastic. And Grimes is a huge artist, music artist. Anyway, so she's having this conversation with Daniel Ek, and she's like, I wasn't the biggest fan of Spotify, but anyway, she was having this, you know, conversation with Daniel Ek, and Daniel Ek was like explaining how the economics have changed for bands and artists that want to actually get into the game. And he was like, beforehand, the entire music, ecosystem, in terms of they were making money on a commercial level from music, was about 20,000 bands globally. He said that was it. That was it. There was like 20,000 bands globally that were, basically, taking all of the revenue. And he said, and what has happened now is that's been distributed over like however many millions of bands.
Yes.
And he wasn't like, I'm not a fan or not a fan of Spotify. I'm sort of like neutral.
You're taking no stance.
I'm taking. I'm going to circle back in a minute. I will say that I don't lie awake at night hating on Spotify. It doesn't drive me crazy. And I'm sure that some people that have had to deal with the new Spotify ecosystem and landscape that it's created might feel very differently to that, but it's just something that I haven't personally dealt with. But it was it was interesting. I guess it was an interesting point. It was like, the money has sort of like, obviously interest rates and stuff like that, or we've obviously printed more money, but we've got more people, and now there's like vastly more bands, more bands. So the pool of money has actually decreased for each individual band, as it were, because there's now not 20,000 bands, there's 2 million, 20 million bands, whatever it is. Sure. Yeah, it's an interesting take. What was I going to say on Spotify? That's what I was thinking, because I was watching something the other day. I was watching it was like a Joe Satriani or Steve Vai old documentary or something like that on YouTube, and it was one of their shows, and I was looking at the performance that they'd put on, and it was that realization. I hate to say that I'm a little late to the party, but I was like, oh, I maybe get it more now than I did sort of 5 minutes ago when I was watching this. I was watching how they were putting this show together, and really, if you think about that show, that album, and the show that they do on the back of it, that's like a product. It's like a product. And what Spotify has done to people that were building those products, it's kind of made it's made it a lot more challenging to, for sure, exactly,
to sell that product.
And I thought about myself building products. So I was like, because I put my heart and soul into products, what would it be like if my reality changed and suddenly I woke up and it's you're still going to put 110% into this product, but it's going to be, you're going to be able to make sort of like, I don't know, like 10% of the revenue that you used to be able to make. Like, how would I feel about that? Not that great.
0.1% of the revenue.
yeah. So it's
right. Yeah, it just depends on your position in the industry, right? I mean, for users or for consumers, Spotify, it's just that thing about convenience, right? And I have so many friends that hate Spotify and that are like, that you need to switch to Tidal or at least Apple Music. We have Apple Music. We don't have Tidal, but
do you have Spotify?
I remember, we have Spotify. Yeah, and I remember I went and toured Spotify in New York when I was out with an artist named Jeremy Messersmith in 2015. And it was really interesting. They were, at that time, they were massive, of course, still. But they were like wondering how indie artists felt about them. And at that time, this artist that I was with, he was like, oh, it's fine. I mean, it gives me a shot. So, in a way, it's like, I think in the beginning there were these big juggernaut bands that were like, "Oh, this is killing us." I mean, cut to Lars Ulrich from Metallica freaking out about LimeWire or what was the Napster, right? The Napster thing,
mate. Yeah.
But I mean, I have always felt it's a really, really controversial opinion, but I've always felt that the exposure, that the ability to get something out there, and that then the cream will rise to the top, is a feature, not a bug, of something like Spotify. Like, you can put music on that platform. The gatekeepers are gone. Yes, there's 20 million bands now or whatever. No, you don't get paid the same way that you did when you were selling records, but you have global exposure. And I hate the word exposure because it brings to mind, those sleazy, like promoters that are like, oh, we're not going to pay you, but the exposure, boy, is going to be great. So come and play the show. And exposure, people are like, I can't feed my family with exposure, but maybe you can, just if you look at a slightly bigger picture. If it gives you more access into things, you might find revenue streams in ways that you didn't even anticipate. So, I feel like I myself have benefited from it. Now, if I were a big artist with a big company that was focused on record sales, I'd be pissed, of course.
Yeah. I've got, similar to you, like a controversial view about Spotify. Not that I'm in the, I'm not in the trenches, having to battle this out every single day, making records for a living. So, take it for what it's worth. But I think it's like a really famous author called Jim Rohn. I was watching or listening to something that he'd said once, and he was talking about, and again, I'm going to butcher this, but I'll give you my own version of it. He's like, there's so many people bitching and moaning about the reality they're in, because and they're pissed. And that and what it's his fault, it's her fault, it's like it's somebody's fault, right?
like find the person to blame.
Yeah, exactly. And his message was more like, well, that's going on, yes, but you have a choice. Are you going to be the person that takes that stance and puts all your energy into that, or if you look through history, sometimes the wind changes.
Yeah.
And sometimes the wind changes drastically. And you've got a choice where you can put all of your energy into trying to battle, the changing of the wind.
Yep.
Or you can just move your sail and you can sail in a different direction. And I think that, and I say that with the greatest of love. I know that, people will be thinking, it's not, you just don't know. You just don't know. But I can say from a strategic point of view, if I was working in, record sales, or band management or, anything like that, I would be absolutely putting my artists on Spotify, because I think that is a tidal wave. And I think that, I don't want to swim against the tide. I would be looking at that, and then I would be looking at other opportunities of, okay, that isn't our revenue. That isn't the main source of revenue generation anymore. Now we need to switch to something else. What can we do to be creative and really move with the times of where it's moving? And I'm not sure what that is, but that's how I think I'd think about it.
Absolutely. I mean, and the artist that I mentioned that we went to Spotify, that's with this artist named Jeremy Messersmith, and just a real small granular case for Spotify, I think. And I wonder if Jeremy would say the same thing. But, so you have a local artist who Jeremy is a big fish in the Minneapolis pond, but still, a pretty small fish, obviously, in the larger scheme of things, right? But as a result of streaming and Spotify and things like Spotify and Apple Music, there are so many people that know about him that wouldn't know about him without it. And that has then led to opportunities where he's done, really lucrative house concerts. So someone will book him to do something that probably would never, ever have known about him via just traditional means. Right? Or even streaming radio services. Like there's a great radio station called The Current. And because that streams, because there's that internet technology, I guess I'm widening it out to internet, not just Spotify now. But what happened for him, I hope he would say the same thing, is that you have all this access, and then there are opportunities that result from that access that he probably wasn't anticipating, Whereas the traditional model would just be like, get out on the road, play in these cities, try to amass, radio play in these cities. And I think this way, I think he might actually prefer it because he's able to then target certain places that he wants to go and play shows, develop a real strong niche fan base, play those house concerts, make that money, really connect with fans really directly. And I think that's a result of like internet culture, streaming culture.
Yeah. And just think about sort of like, to your point, like with the internet, yes, platforms like Spotify have created the current reality where music's free, right? Like it's very hard to charge for a regular album now, but also think about everything that's being given to us as well. You know, like basically the gatekeepers have just disappeared.
Yes.
And I'm not just talking about Spotify. I mean, like online, you can, and this has been done by hundreds of thousands of bands and artists. You can actually create a following of hundreds of, or if not millions of people off your own back.
For sure.
And that's where I see people really flourishing in this new, you know, and not to just point the finger at Spotify, because I think if it wasn't Spotify, it would be somebody else, right?
Right.
But yes, that happened. But this other thing happened over here that gave us a lot more opportunity as well. And if we're a little more strategy, you know, focused and business savvy about it, you know, and I think that's when, for me, I think maybe like it'll help for all the listeners as well. We talk about people that we've seen and inspire us that we think that are really thriving in this new environment.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested in your take. For me, a couple of bands, I think that Snarky Puppy were very hot, very quick off the mark with this shit.
Yes.
You know, I think they saw the writing on the wall. Mike is obviously a smart cook. Michael League, obviously, shout out to Mike. Yes. And like, they took a completely different direction. So yes, you could buy the album, but they were also uploading the entire album with world-class video, better than anybody else had done, for free onto YouTube. Like, so it doesn't make sense if you come from the older reality. Why would they do that, right? Okay, so they're selling their album, but you can also watch the entire thing in fully HD, sexy, badass video on YouTube for free. And it was actually that strategy, and them obviously being badass musicians and consistent as fuck, that actually got them to where they were. Like, that's why everybody knows who Snarky Puppy. And then off the back of that, they've done world tours. They've actually created a music festival down in Florida that they do every year. They've created a record label, blah blah blah, right? So they're one band that jumped to mind that really saw the writing on the wall and shifted.
Absolutely. And if you think about a live experience like going to see a Snarky show, I've never been, I'd love to go, but I mean, you know, a band that I love, there's an artist from Nashville called Tristan, and I can listen to all of Tristan's music on all the streaming platforms. But when she and her band came to the 7th Street Entry, you know, I guess it would have been 2 years ago now, you know, like right pre-COVID, and played, I was so captivated by the performance and I loved it. And I just wanted to support. So I went over and I bought a shirt and I bought all of the music because I felt so emotional in that space that then I wanted to support, buy all the physical stuff. Right. And I think that that's what happens, especially with a band like Snarky, too. You know, you can go on and stream it for free, but people that really love it and are really impacted on an emotional level will want to spend dollars, whether that is in support of a record campaign, whether it's via Patreon. I don't know if Mike's got a Patreon set up, but right. Or if it's buying a CD, even if you don't have a CD player, right? Yeah. There's this, you know, when I had that fun, lesson, but it was really just a way for him to yell at me with Captain Fat Hands, who runs True Crime Garage. He said to me, you know, he said artists need to give opportunities for people to support them. You know, so making merch, making ways that you can pay to support an artist, especially in this new era where no one's buying records. Well, then figure out something else to sell. Figure out something else to incentivize your consumers or your crowd, your audience, your community purchase and help support you.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't need to just be a CD or a vinyl record, right? It can be in the form of so many things.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of other people that jump to mind that have really nailed it.
Do you know the band Lawrence? It's a brother.
You've shown me them before. Yeah.
Brother, sister, Clyde, and I am going to forget his sister's name on the podcast right now, which is killing me. I want to take a guess, but I don't want to be wrong. Clyde and maybe Gracie? That's probably wrong. It's probably wrong, dude. Probably wrong. But Clyde Lawrence and his sister, who is the star of the show.
Sorry, sister.
They're incredible. And I got to work with Clyde on an Eric Hutchinson record, which was so much fun. So, and he was like, "Oh yeah, check
Gracie.
us out."
Gracie
Did
Lawrence.
I say Gracie?
I think you might have, yeah.
I did.
Clyde and Gracie Lawrence, yeah.
Oh, they're unreal. And they have completely bucked the system and done things organically and done things like go into the studio with their friends and arrange these unbelievable live arrangements of their tunes, put them out online and exploded. And they just played Coachella and, they're massive. And they've got a big song on Top 40 radio right now in the States. And they're doing it. Their social media is incredible. They've made videos DIY for years and years, and they've just committed to making amazing content for the internet. Period.
Got it. Yeah.
And it's unbelievable. I gotta send you a couple of links.
I'm gonna hit you with some other peeps.
Please.
And it'll be fun to talk about their strategies as well, and just like what they've done, because some people might be listening to this, and some will be, and they'll know these bands. But I think that some people, maybe that from the older generation above us, won't know like how people have done this, and then for younger people as well coming up, it might give them sort of like some people to check out. So Wolfpack nailed it. Nailed it. So what did they do? What was their strategy?
Well, I mean, they did that thing really early on where they discovered that Spotify would pay for, I don't know what it was. They hacked the algorithm. They hacked the system in some way where they made a record of silence. Do you know this?
I have heard of this, yeah.
And they encouraged all of their people to just stream it overnight.
Yeah, yeah.
They made a bunch of money.
How did they get it? Can you remember how they got all the people though?
Yes, they made amazing videos that focused on their personality. They understood the internet. I mean, you probably have a more succinct, but I mean, I remember when I saw Jack Stratton's, when he would talk about the Holy Trinity, where he was talking about, the Holy Trinity of bass players or of tambourine players or funk guitar players. And also just doing these unbelievable videos, single cam shots that roved around the band that highlighted performances of each individual band member.
Yeah, exactly.
Content. But you probably have a more pinpoint thing that you wanted to say about it.
Well,
how did they do it?
I'm just making notes here. So when we talked about Snarky Puppy, we were like, they got really their exposure through YouTube. That's how they built their brand through YouTube. They did sell records. But you could listen to them for free on YouTube.
Right.
And they were just like brutally consistent. That's the three sort of like core elements of what they were doing. So Wolfpack absolutely got their first, they built their brand on YouTube. I think that they still, and you can listen to all of their albums and all of their songs and stuff like that. For the most part, I think they're all on YouTube for free. They made videos, to your point, Ian. They did these really cool, they made the Bugger feature. They were like, we cannot afford, in fact, I would say that they're the king of that. They couldn't afford like multicams and stuff like that. All of that early stuff, it looks like it was recorded on a cheap, crappy mobile phone.
Yes,
but because of the way they did it, but it's wicked, and it kind of sort of like gels with the music that they were creating. So they made a Bug the feature, and again, same as Snarky Puppy, they were just brutally consistent, just just like maniacal. So just like, I mean, it's like releasing these new videos all the time that were amazing. Next up, Corey Wong. So Corey, little different because he was in Wolfpack, but he, for me, is the one member that's kind of sort of like doing his own thing, and he's really, he's flying, right? So he built his initial audience up with Wolfpack, but then launched his other his own YouTube channel, and he's nailing it on there. He's creating loads of free content on his YouTube channel, and he's been utterly and amazingly consistent with the stuff that he's putting out, and it's just really inspiring to see that. And then also, again, like kind of sort of like different from the other ones, but Scary Pockets. I think Scary Pockets is so cool.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, and all they do, right, and I say like all they do, like I'm doing air quotes, right, all they do is they play cool arrangements of really popular songs. They're a band and they do really cool arrangements of popular songs, but they've gone from sort of like, 4 or 5 of them that were doing their thing, and then it's just expanded and expanded out. And now it's a huge crew, and they've got like really fantastic artists, and like all the bass players like Sean Hurley and Tim LaFave and Adam Neely's been on there.
Yep.
And like Nicole's been on there. Like there's a bunch of bass players been on there. But yeah.
And man, so I want to go back to this thing you said about they made the bug a feature for a minute. And I want for people listening, I'd love for you to break that down a little bit, because I agree with you, especially with Wolf and especially with Jack Conte, who's Scary Pockets. Do you remember when Jack Conte was making demos for Electro Harmonix pedals? Did you see any of that very, very early with Pomplamoose and his wife?
Yeah,
Just incredible videos. And you're just doing it with the stuff he had, super creative, cool arrangements, and it made like lo-fi cool. Or I remember seeing those videos thinking, it didn't matter that he wasn't doing it at the Snarky Puppy level. Now, Snarky did something incredible, right? But you don't have to. I think like something that I would love for you to talk about a little bit is like, what does it mean to make the bug a feature? And if you're listening to this podcast and you want to make some content, you just don't know, you're sort of daunted, you don't have the gear, you don't have fancy cameras, what does make the bug the feature mean?
It means, for me, making the downside an actual the positive. I mean, like, so you might think to yourself, it would be very easy for Wolfpack, for instance, to be like, I wish we could make some videos for the band, but we can't afford to get anybody. No. It's going to cost thousands of dollars. We'll need to hire cameras. We've got no money. So that's the bug, right?
Yes.
But and what they did is they were like, they probably said all of that to themselves, but they were like, well, but can we just get a friend to come round and record it all on his phone, and then we'll put sort of like a filter. Once when we're editing it, we'll put a filter in front of it to make it look even grainier than it is. Like lean into it, right? Make it grainier, and we'll just make sure that we mix it decently. And that's what they did. So the bug was they had no money, they had no resources, and because of that, they actually, leaned into it, and they created a real opportunity for themselves to create like a new kind of look, all based off of having, no money. And I've got another great example of this. I'll always remember it, actually. I'm a huge fan of this guy called Casey Neistat,
of course,
who was a vlogger who did vlog content every single day for like several years on YouTube. And if anybody's watched vlogs before, or vlogs, where people are sort of like filming themselves, like Casey Neistat pretty much just invented that medium on YouTube. And he was amazing at it. And he was actually a filmmaker, him and his brother, Van Neistat. They were filmmakers. They'd done like indie films before. So he had sort of like that background. But when it came to making his own videos, he did it all on one camera. He did it all on one camera. And and he was just such an amazing storyteller, and knew because he had a filmmaking background. I don't think he ever went to school to do it. I think he just made films. I mean, he just went and did it. Right. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. He just sort of like went and did it. He'd made a lot of films in his background. Because of that, I think that it gave him a real feel for narrative and how to pull a story together within video. Anyway, so he was just doing this crushing job. And then he got the opportunity they wanted him to do something for the Oscars. They were like, oh, Casey Neistat's going to do something for the Oscars. And I was like, whoa. And he was like, so I'm going to go down to LA. And he was like, and they've got this video crew. And like, I've been meeting their creative team about it. We've been talking about this, that, and the other. And like, oh my word. So anyway, so he makes a vlog about this.
Yes.
So he goes down to LA and he's doing the whole drone thing. So you can see all of the crews,
right,
all of the catering. I kid you not, there must be sort of like 10 wagons full of gear, and they've got massive lights. They've probably got about, like, honestly, it looks about like 200 crew there. There's makeup artists and stuff like that. I'm thinking, this is going to be next level. They've got Casey Neistat, who's just the freaking Don at sort of like coming up with this sort of like, visual video ideas, storytelling, etc., etc. He's partnering with these guys, and they're going to do something for the Oscars. It's going to be mind-blowing.
Right.
I saw the video, and there's hundreds of people involved.
Yes.
It was shit.
What? I haven't seen it.
Dude. It was basically him just standing there talking to a camera with some sort of like cool lights in the background. I kid you not. It was awful. I was like, and instantly I was like, oh, there's a lesson to be learned in here.
Yes.
You can have all of the people, I mean, like all of the money and all of the cameras.
Yes.
But it doesn't give you anything more than just if you're just a single human with a camera and you can do that shit on your own, and because you can make all the decisions and you can be creative and you can just do it.
Right.
If you add all of these people in, it can just really make it. The complexity
can tank it.
Yeah, we suffer from this, haven't we? We've suffered from this like the last 2 weeks. Ian and I have been writing this slap accelerator, and at several points, like Ian's probably been thinking, should I have it? And I've been thinking, should I have it? And then Eric, bless Eric, like Eric, shout out to Eric, he's probably been, and Jim, like, and it would be, it's much simpler to actually do it on your own. And I think that just leaning back into that, making the bug a feature, it's sometimes, when you're backed into a corner and you have to be creative to do what you want to do, to make what you want to make, to say what you want to say. I think having your back against the wall financially and just like, it's sometimes a real great place to be, because you can do stuff. Yeah, you can just make stuff happen. And I'm really trying not to forget that. Because like we've been having this experience recently over the last few weeks where we've been talking about doing a talk show, right? And Ian and I are super excited about it.
Yes.
We're super excited about it, and it's going to be freaking great. And so we're wanting to go out to LA, and we're going to fly bass players in, and we're going to do this talk show. We're going to listen to their track. We want to do something for the bass community that the entire bass community are like, holy shit, this is insane. And we want to put it on YouTube completely free, the whole 9 yards. But always in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about Casey Neistat and that experience I had, and how the complexity just actually killed the thing. They killed it. He would have done something absolutely outstanding, beyond comparable. I mean, like beyond anybody else.
If he would have been in creative control.
Yeah. Hey, here's a camera. Go do something great.
Yeah.
He would have nailed it. So I think that, that's something that we need to bear in mind when we're planning this as well. And it's hard, isn't it? Because I think that we're in a place where we're working with really, really talented individuals. Shout out to Lydia, shout out to Sharon on the team, who are like super detail orientated. And without people like that, our end product would be nowhere near what it's
course.
going to be.
Yes.
It would be pants, you know,
Yes.
because you and I would be like
Yes.
drastically unprepared,
Yes.
and we'd be just like, yeah, I mean, like all of that, right?
Right.
And like Sharon and Lydia, they're on the other side where it'll be like super, like, you know, they'll know exactly what it's going to look like. They'll know
Yes.
exactly they'll know all of the things. And for me, the interesting thing is like how to meet in the middle.
combine that.
Yeah, how do you combine it so both of you understand the superpowers? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I had a combined experience with you in Leeds. When we shot that little short, Scott and I shot this amazing, fun, short piece of content together that, you know, like you were leaving that day for holiday, and I begged you via Loom to come in just for like an hour and shoot this thing. And I don't want to give it away because it's so fun. And, you know, hopefully we'll use it for something. But I mean, the cool thing about it was everyone who was there, it was me, Scott, Jim, and Alan. And was that it? I think it was just the four of us.
Yeah.
And Alan was wondering if we should shoot this thing on like a big fancy camera, and we convinced him to use my phone. So I hand Alan, who is like legit videographer, my phone. Film it vertical, my man, you know, and he did. And then pretty soon, you know, Jim is suggesting shots. We're outside, we're doing crazy stuff, we're having fun. Everybody is laughing. I mean, we laughed so hard. We laughed till I was hoarse. And then by the end, you know, it became this really cool piece of content because of the collaboration, but because there wasn't a ton of baggage around what it needed to be production-wise. There was a good idea. There was a small amount of gear to make that good idea happen. There was a location. There were 4 creative people that dove in for the good of the project. And I think I think we got some really cool stuff out of it. And to me, that was the right amount of preparedness, talent, mixed with that kind of gritty guerrilla, like, let's just get out and do this and see what happens. Yeah, and it was amazing. Yeah. It was amazing. So it can be done.
Yeah, it can be done. It can be done, man. It's like, it's endlessly fascinating to me. It really is. Like, what I was thinking of, I think that I'm not going to do a great job of this, but it's something that I've been thinking about over the weekend is like creation, I really want to get myself, like you, the team, like in this sort of like this, like making sure that we're always creating. And we think about ourselves as sort of like a creative machine. Like we create stuff. What do you guys do? We create.
Yes.
We don't talk. We like, obviously we talk, you know, obviously we have meetings and stuff like that. Obviously we do this, that, and the other, but we create.
We're making stuff.
We're making stuff. Just the actual process and guess sort of like dedication to, like, you know, to saying we own this, we create, we make stuff, might sort of like change the angle that we're looking at the object, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I think, because I do this, right? And I can't remember who I was listening to one time. They were like, hey, you can either create or you consume. Yes. One of the two.
Yes.
You can create or you consume. You got to be really mindful of making sure that you are creating a lot more than you are consuming. The ratio needs to be all about the creation, not about the consumption. And when I look at people like, you know, look at like Wolfpack, Joe Dart, Corey Wong, Scary Pockets, Snarky Puppy, for me, they are like masters of creation, of like making stuff. I'd love to know their ratio of creation versus consumption. Yeah, man, I'd love to know that. Yeah.
Me too. And I love that idea. And I've said this a lot before too, but, you know, bringing this to social media for a moment. If you're a creative individual and you yearn to create, and you have all these things available to you, you can create on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, so many things. If you create more than you consume, you won't feel burned out. You won't feel like you have to take a break. I feel that way anyway. Now, I could just be talking for myself, but when I start to feel that feeling of like, oh, I need a break from this thing, this intense, Oh, it's always coming. Oh, feed the algorithm. The algorithm is unsatiable. The content monster. That I feel that the most when I'm not creating. I feel that the most when I'm consuming, because I see other people's creation and I go, oh, and it shines a light on my, that I haven't done it. And I haven't put up an Instagram post for a while. And I think, oh, maybe I should just bail. I mean, I don't actually, but it's those times when I haven't done something for a while where I go, I don't know, because I feel the weight of all of this other stuff on top of me. And if I can get into a zone where I can make something, even a little quick piece of story content, doesn't have to be massive, but just something, I feel so much better. I want to be creating more than I'm consuming. I think it's the key. If you're a creative person, if you want to do that in the first place, if you don't, it's fine. You don't have to engage, right? But I think
sleep easy.
Yes. But if you want to create, boy, as much as you can do it versus the doom scroll, right? If you're doom scrolling, one of the best ways to do is stop, turn on your camera, say something to camera that you've been wanting to say. Like that's the easiest way to do it, to get yourself out of the rut.
Absolutely. Did you see Nick pop on? Did you see he popped on?
No,
yeah,
I didn't.
On the side. We're recording this thing in Riverside, and Nick appeared and then disappeared. I was like, he's probably popped on. Went, oh.
I didn't see Nick.
Yeah, he did pop in. Man, what were we supposed to be talking about today, Ian? I don't think we actually had a list. So again, we were kind of riffing today and we were just going for it. We have got we are going to, if anybody heard us last week, we were talking about jumping into the AMP simulation debate. And I do apologize if you thought that was going to be this week, but let's do it next week. AMP simulation debate. Can
I ask you a quick question before you go?
Yeah, go for it, man.
People listening that want to, so this whole episode apparently has been about creation and what are you going to do in this new digital landscape? What are you going to do? Are you going to crab about it and be grumpy and posting how much you hate Spotify? How's that going to help your artistry? Are you going to do that? Are you going to just scroll and then take freaking week or month-long breaks from Instagram? Are you going to do that? Is that going to help your career or your trajectory as an artist? I think no. So I want to know from your perspective, Scott, how does someone get in? If someone is going, I either want to not do this at all or I want to go hard. I want to know from you, what's the first step that you can take to getting control of your own creativity and not letting the scroll think that you're not good enough to create, that you're not set up to create. What's that first thing that you want to advise these listeners to do to get in the ring?
Holy shit, dude. For me, two things. I would find somebody. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? I want to model what other people have done because I'm lazy inherently, and I want to look at them and be like, yeah, I can do something like that. So I'll be, if there are people that, that inspire you online and they're doing a certain thing, could you make it your own? Is there a way that you could model what they're doing? Yeah. And there's a lot of successful people done that, Yeah, for sure. That's a rabbit hole to go down. But yes, I'd be looking for people to model. And then the next thing is the most crucial thing, putting some kind of skin in the game, and committing yourself to it. Like just not creating one video.
Yes.
Not creating one video. Yes. Say to yourself, I am going to create 12. That was off the top of my head.
I love 12.
12 videos, and I'm going to release them over the next 30 days, whatever. Yes. And I am a piece of shit if I don't do that. Right?
Make it a deadline, make it a goal. Set something for yourself, yes.
Yeah, and be hard on yourself about it. That, for me, that would be it. It's sort of like finding, I wouldn't want to be in this sort of like, this kind of frame of mind of like, I'm going to experiment with lots of different types of formats and lots of, it's just sort of like, for me, I'm just sort of like, no freaking way. It's just like a load of work. It's not wasted time, but for me, it's really, important that we get going. And in fact, if you are the type of person that wants to experiment and you want to find who you are on your social media, I will invite you to just be like, just take a leap of faith and don't do that. Because I was having a conversation with somebody recently. It wasn't at all about social media. It was another project, and they'd spoken for 5 seconds. I was like, they're not going to do this.
Oh, wow.
And they weren't going to do it because it was too complex. I was like, oh, this is really complex. They're not going to do it.
Talking about.
Yeah, you do. Yeah,
I do.
And we all do that. We all do it, so you got to make it as simple as possible. Find somebody's format that resonates with you, and then just commit to making the videos. Commit to making the videos within an amount of time. 12 videos, 30 days, something like that. I love it.
And and let me give you one thing. And if that sounds daunting to you, if you're like 12 videos, I don't even know how to start. Like, how could I even make 12 videos? I've never even made one. Here's what you do. You take your phone and you put it in front of your face. You either face it to your face, or if that feels daunting, you point it at something that you like and you talk about it. Point it at your face and say something truthful. Say something that you've always wanted to say. Say something that is meaningful to you, or point it at something that you like, admire, think is cool, whatever, and say something about what you're pointed at.
Yeah, you did that. You did that about like a bass bag or something. It was wicked. It was a great piece of content. You were like, this. It was like a pedal bag or a gig bag or something. Yeah, it was a rucksack.
I do it all the time.
It was freaking great. Dudes, go make a mess. We'll see you in a bit.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers, everybody.